As the snow melted away, the long process of getting everything ready begins. I did feel a little bad for the animals we had to hunt. Many just woke up from their hibernation only to find talons piercing their hearts. Yet I was making sure that the moment we stepped away from the river, we had at minimum 3 days worth of water. Though we had fairies, frays, pixies, and even a couple of dryads, there was no guarantee of water in the mountains, not where we're going. We also made as much pemmican, jerky, and travel cakes as possible. A few were a bit uncomfortable with the travel cakes, as they didn't really like it, which is little more than compressed grains with just a little bit of honey as a binding agent. We could make bread, but without yeast, it would be unbelievably hard and almost inedible for most. In truth, only Baron the Minotaur, brought the Centaur, and a few other of the species could eat these, but they actually enjoyed them very, very much. Even with my strength, I'm sure I would have broke my teeth on those damn things, though. With a little luck, we'd get what we need to make some hardtack as well, though by the time we were done making it, you could actually use it to sharpen a knife, it was so hard. I remember having to subsist on it back in the day, along with salted pork for months. I cringe hard at that distant memory, but everything I remember will actually help keep us alive, and that's the important part. It's going to be a very long walk across the mountains. A mountain range that makes the Rockies and the Carpathians look like an afternoon stroll. Yet we did not have to carry as much as you might think. While we sat all winter, a few of the craftsmen actually built carts. Brock was not happy at the idea of a harness, but it was much, much better than having the weight actually on his back, especially going up a steep bank. Ichabod was willing to pull one as well, but we had to make a harness much smaller for him. After all, he's hardly 10 years old. And anyone of large size in this group is going to have to pull something. A few asked why we bought all the hides and blankets with us and thinking we could just get more, and I had to remind them that the air is a lot colder up in the mountains. And I mean a lot. Lash the Orc was not exactly thrilled about all this, as orcs don't like the cold. She wanted to stay closer to the base of the mountain, but she also knew that she had to move with the rest of us. Ogres, on the other hand, if we had one, love the cold. Hell, they thrive in it. Just like in my previous life, there was another reason Lash complained. The strap that she had to use would have to keep moving to different parts of her body as she walked, as she did not like it where it was. I thought maybe as a belt, but it would be better off higher up on her torso, but she did not like a wide strap that sat right between her breasts. I had to quickly tell her that I would heal her every single night if that's what's necessary, twice a day if that's what it meant. And that went for all of them. I made sure they all knew that any of us that can heal are going to heal you because we need to keep going. A few in our number thought they could get by doing something sneaky, and that's when Shereel came up with the rule of no riding on the carts without permission from the one pulling. This upset a few of the children and flying personnel, but they didn't say too much, but they did say something. One of our losses actually came before we even began our trek up the hill. Hensel said that he wanted to stay, and when we asked why, he claimed he was getting too elderly for such activities, which the only thing running through my mind was another voice saying, I'm getting too old for this shit. Also, he had begun to get feelings for Sue. Though she stayed at the mouth of the cave while we talked, we could see that Sue was standing at the entrance. Sue had actually changed her form just a bit to match Scarlet's silhouette, but with only much, much bigger memories. She looked female in appearance, at least her outside form, and that was clear she was actually having trouble holding that form as she kind of wobbled there in a moment. Scarlet saw this, thought about herself, looked down, looked at them both again, and just shot a look of, really? But didn't actually say anything. I thought more would stay, actually, but I was wrong. Listina and Yolan weren't staying, but they both said that they would actually take the river and meet us on the other side. Being the species they are, they can actually handle the white water without any problems. We wondered if all that white water would actually be an issue at first, but they kind of laughed at us. As in, they looked at each other and then giggled at the idea as though this was some sort of other type of activity. I still didn't know what that was all about, but I began to make our way up the mountain. A moment that was very, very slow. The weight of the supplies slowed us down as we started to leave our campsite. The weight of the supplies slowing us down a lot, and there was not a single one of us that was actually in shape enough to hump all the way up this hill without frequent stops. I kept healing everyone as we went along, sometimes as we walked, but that drained me even faster, and it was even more difficult. The halflings had an issue for sure, but not as much as you would think. Since they are similar to dwarves, basically they're a subspecies of each other, their leg muscles are surprisingly strong. I still had to carry a few of the children on occasion, and I remember on that first day carrying the young elf Inez for at least 3 solid hours. She was actually falling behind badly, and after I picked her up, she actually fell asleep in my arms. Jezebel offered to carry for a while, but Inez was already passed out, and I figured, you know what? Jezebel is really thin, and she needs to be able to work on her own. Besides, the auto recovery function in me was working. Well, at least a little, which kept me going. Jezebel also began to aid in healing whenever we stopped. Being an elf, she is naturally gifted in such things, but she still had trouble touching anyone. I was hardly on my feet when I saw her treating Broche at night when he straight up groaned out a muscle relief from painful muscles tightening up and of course his joints just yelling at him. Jezebel immediately pulled away. She was shaking, and when I came over, I placed my hand on her shoulder and told her, "Don't worry, you don't have to push yourself, okay?" She seemed to actually take this as a challenge, and I saw resolve in her eyes once again, resolve to destroy the demons holding her back. Good thing, too, as I sat next to Scarlet, I actually don't remember passing out that night. It was like flicking a switch. I awoke the next morning on something soft. I didn't know what it was until I pried my own eyes open until I realized that I'm laying on Scarlet's thighs. I jumped up really fast and I hit my head on something soft as I pulled away. Then I looked around and realized she had not moved from the spot since I actually passed out the night before. For a few moments, I fought the daylight as I covered my eyes, yet the thirst actually got me all the way to my feet. After I got a bit of water and food, we all stretched out and we got going again. None of us actually setting up any type of tents, sometimes just not even pulling anything over us, just laying down and sleeping because we're just so tired. The slow climb up the hills got easier and harder as we continued. Easier due to the healing magic, allowing the muscles to grow each day without issue. They would tear and mend, something that usually would take days, sometimes a week, could be taken care of in minutes. I would smile, thinking about the weeks, months, years even, I spent in physical training to get even close to where I was after less than a week climbing up this dang hill. Everyone's muscles actually got dense very quickly. Everyone's endurance actually rose so fast that most were actually not even fully tired when we stopped at night, which was nice. We could at least enjoy a little bit of firelight, at least enjoy cooking our meals instead of just choking something down and falling up against a tree. Not to mention, many actually started forming up. The first one I noticed was Lash because, well, she's so tall that her thigh muscles right in front of my eyes. And as she pulled her way up the hill, I could see the muscles just flexing. And over the days, they got solid and dense, and everything got very shapely. It was kind of hard to miss because she doesn't wear much clothes. Actually, most orcs don't wear much at all either. Reminds me of someone else, Scarlet. Yet you could see this across everyone, even the youngest. Even as I paused, I happened to check out my legs, pressing down on the thighs and the calves, and I realized that they would actually got extremely dense. I thought to myself for a moment, yes, this is working out really well, but I'm not sure this is the right way to use healing magic. Thankfully, the forming up of the bodies actually gave people something to talk about, which actually made it so we didn't have to walk in complete silence. Yes, I could do that, and people wondered why I was so quiet. I didn't have the heart to tell them that's how I was trained. But still, things were getting easier. Yet things also got harder as we reached the tree line. Now, there is very limited resources, if any at all. Rough and shaky terrain made the carts unstable at best. Loose footing became a major issue. Of course, those that could fly didn't really see the issue as they simply soared above us, watching for danger and hunted for anything they could find. As we reached the top of the first mountain, everybody paused to take in the view. Then the more interesting turn was going downhill, and that was just about to begin. Yet before we went downhill, everybody started complaining. This was just the first mountaintop that we had to cross over, the first peak, the first saddle, the first ridge, the first depression, the first thing that we would actually have to go over to get to the other side. And they, of course, complained a lot. Not nearly as much as before we started up the hill. Yet each time they complained, I started chuckling. They couldn't understand why I'm sitting there trying to hold my sides as I have silent laughter. And they finally said, "Why? You did this last time. Why are you laughing so hard?" Finally catching my breath, I said, "Don't you know about the journey of 1,000 miles?" They looked at me as though I was speaking some sort of other code. I said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step and a lot of bitching." They all looked at each other, and then, thankfully, the tension was gone. Heading down the hill, we all had to take turns next to the carts to keep them from actually pushing over those that were pulling them. The last thing we needed is one of our strong ones to actually get injured as the cart itself started to take over. As we reached the bottom of this first mountain, everybody groaned at the idea of doing that again. Thankfully, in the valleys that we were now in, the game is plentiful and the plants are growing very well. We paused for a full day, not just to recuperate, but to also resupply. Meth was quick to begin hunting for us, as well as scouting for an area that had fruits, berries, or anything else we could eat. Kicker is, the food was actually all around us in that moment. There was no need to go far. Dandelions were everywhere. Stone crop was right next to my feet. Plenty of dry grass heads that we could pound into cakes. Nut trees were actually scattered around. All were edible, and it was just amazing. I even found something that looks like thistle. We all had to boil it, of course, because, well, I wasn't going to risk it being eaten the way it is, especially since it was difficult to even touch it. But it turned out to taste like celery, of all things. Even a small patch of cattail that made everybody look at me weird as I basically dove in to harvest it, sinking in all the way to my thighs. I found out once we got everything out and I processed it and I told people what they could and couldn't eat, it turns out the tubers, once cleaned, are like candy for our vegetarian species. They began to actually argue over it, and I simply pointed and said, "There's more in there, just aim for the live ones." A few of them were hesitant to go in, and of course, if they weighed heavy, they couldn't go into the water, but they still got a few more. Unlike them, my current body is almost exclusively a carnivore, but I can still enjoy a little bit of all the other stuff, the nuts, the berries, and so on. Thanks to that, at night, we all ate very well. There were multiple fresh kills on the fire, many of them from pretty large prey, which made me wonder why Meth was going after something so big. There was no fire watch that night beyond myself and Lash. We sat there next to the fire, and she spent most of the night talking about the one that raised her, a human that was clearly not ready to raise an orc child. The young girl summoned Lash at the age of 5, just like I did with Scarlet, but she didn't have any knowledge of this. The resonance she received from summoning Lash was that of dexterity and mostly strength. A 5-year-old girl does not take well to manual labor, but she still did it. She still did the job, and I was beginning to respect this girl beyond anything. She did this for 10 years. Reaching 15, she summoned Vex, and I looked over and I looked down at the 3-year-old dryad sleeping close by. When the summoner actually got a hold of Vex, she immediately named her right there before the first round of resonance came through, and the resonant backlash was so strong, it actually killed her. Nobody could actually save her. And since the first 2 summons was Lash and a songbird that was very similar to a peacock, but I didn't know where it was. Honestly, I didn't want to know, considering the place that we came from turned many of the non-humanoid summons into meals. I shook that out, and since both of those were strictly physical for her body, she couldn't handle the spiritual backlash of the resonance that came through. She started talking more and more about how she was there. She ran up to the one that summoned her, her mom, the one that had raised her, and the one that she watched die. Lash started crying very hard. She started to put her hands over her face as she didn't want anyone to see. I walked over and I reached my arms around her and I let her cry. She reached around me and started pulling me in tight. She may be an orc, but right now she's 16, 17 years old? A teenage girl. I didn't care that her tusks were actually digging into my chest as she pulled me in tight. Sometimes a woman just has to get it out. You have to just sit there and wait no matter how long it takes. I wanted to do more for her, but my powers, they just don't work like that. And I am many things. I have been many things, but a counselor, that's never been one of them. The only thing I could do with my powers at that point was arouse her, which honestly would not be a good idea, especially with a teenage girl. I looked at the sleeping Vex, and in that moment, I was grateful that she was so young. She would actually have no memories that will make her cry like this, break down in someone's arms. Lash sobbed on me for a long while before pulling away and then thanking me for the chest to cry on. I kind of chuckled at that because at this point I don't have much of a chest at all. We spent most of the night in silence after that as she tried to get together her thoughts. Yet before sunup, we did talk, and Lash mentioned how she's jealous that I still actually had my mother, and how it was a shame I didn't know my father. I immediately paused, put my hand in front of my mouth as I'm trying to stop myself from chuckling. With my other hand, I'm digging in tight around the log, trying to put any type of other sensation through my body so I don't just bust out laughing at that point. Nobody knows truly about my origins, and I'd prefer it that way. I had not told anyone, actually, about my memories, but it still hurt at that moment as the funny left me. And then I remembered. I remembered my mother's, my father's, my siblings, my wives, my children, and it cut me deep to remember that. To remember that I may never see them again. Am I going to just keep bouncing around like this? Are they just gone? Lash was still focused on the initial chuckle, and she gets up thinking I don't understand her pain, but I understand it far more than I will ever let her know. In fact, at that point, as she got up to check on Vex, I turned my head as I was trying so hard not to sit there and sob. I kept wiping my eyes and eventually got up and walked into the darkness, saying that I had to go relieve myself. But in truth, I just didn't want her to see the tears gushing out both sides of my eyes. It was a pain nobody should really feel. After 2 days of rest, it's back to going up the hills. We have to cross this entire mountain range to get to the coast, and this is first of many mountains that we need to climb. With full bellies, we begin, and as always, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and you know what it comes with a lot of as well. As we travel up and down the hills, stopping at night, we actually don't have to hurry. We don't have to make distance like we did before. We don't have to travel for 2, sometimes 3 days before setting up a camp. Very few will ever tread into these mountains. Without exact knowledge and, of course, correct equipment, nobody's going to make it far, especially as far as we are, as we cross another mountain and ended up in the high desert. We may be slowly descending at this point, but that does not protect us from the extreme environment. An environment where water is scarce, food even more so, and the extreme heat during the day is inverted with the freezing night air. It is only here that my insistence on bringing the furs come into sharp, very sharp focus. Everyone ended up huddled together at night. Even Brock had several others curl up against his centaur body to get heat. It worked out well as this kept him warm, but it also worked out well for everyone else since horses actually have a higher body temperature than your average human. It's a good thing he didn't mind the children curling up against him as he simply sat there, many times simply having a fur over his human-type shoulders and laying there waiting for everyone else to wake up. I personally stayed awake most nights, or Scarlet did. We tried to never be asleep at the same time, and when we did sleep, we had to sleep farther away from the others. Reason being is we didn't need to compound our current issues with erotic dreams that drain your energy, and of course, your fluids. Whenever I did sleep, the phoenix part of me could actually keep Scarlet very warm along with the more dragon part of me. This actually made it so that she would curl up next to me, hold me tight, stay awake watching the fire as I slept. She curled next to me as she slept, actually to stay warm, as once again my body would simply warm right up. Then again, she isn't exactly cold to the touch, nor is she hard. Her softness made me glad that I'm barely 5 years old at this point. Looking down at her curvaceous, soft form, I'm not sure I would actually be able to control my physical body if I was older. Especially as we sat there and she just moves in her sleep. She always does, especially when she's cold. This is normal as the body will actually try to seek out warmth, to stay warm by gravitating towards whatever heat source there is. And since she's usually wrapped up next to me under one of the furs, well, there you go. This led to a few times people looking at Scarlet waking up with a little bit of question mark on their face. As more than once, Scarlet woke up straddling me as she has unconsciously squirmed towards the heat on a very cold night. Her embarrassment each time was actually worth the price of admission, and the fact that her body weight had made my legs go numb made I wasn't going to just jump up and say anything. Thankfully, at least she didn't sleep on my tail. The only real issue was her tail, though. Her wings could just fold up and get close to her body, especially next to her core. That kept them warm. But her damn tail. I swear that thing had a mind of its own. At least half a dozen times, she would actually open her eyes with the morning sun, and I would ask her, "Are you good?" She would say, "Yes, of course." And I was asked, "Good. Could you take your tail off my balls now?" Again, embarrassment face was worth the fact that I was in a bit of pain at the moment, which was even more embarrassing for her and more hilarious for me when Jezebel or Lash or anyone like that slept in our side camp, thinking that if both of us pass out, at least they'll have a good dream. We tried to find any running water and only found a small portion where the river came up above the ground for just a very short while. At first, one might think we would be ledged up as we couldn't actually walk down to it. It was almost a 500-foot drop to the water. But that's not a problem when several of your numbers can actually fly. Meth was very quick to bring water up, but it was clear that he wanted to give it to his mother first. She gave him a slight reprimand as she reminded him that she could fly as well. She can go get her own, and they need to take care of the children first. I would have laughed at this, but Meth he's kind of messed up. I only have a rough idea of what was done to him, and whatever else was there was rooted extremely deep in his psyche. I wanted to help him with water collection, but I still couldn't fly. Instead, I took inventory of our food, which unfortunately is getting critically low. Also, we're blowing through calories very fast. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the females are sitting there saying how slim they look and how well defined they are. Yet I worried because we still had to pass the halfway point and we needed something. As we tried to stick to the valleys, we kept our eyes out for food all the time. Food and, of course, water. Now that we are finally out of the high deserts, there's more, but not much more. I end up carrying children more and more as we keep going, as we reach the center of these mountain ranges. Yet as we get there, we have a problem. A rather large problem. A lot of very large problems. Overhead, a few kilometers in front of us, a very large number of wyverns is moving around. You could see that some of them are hunting, some of them are arguing about nesting grounds, but they're still there. These flying reptiles look similar to that weird game type show where they kept calling wyverns dragons. As I look closer at these wyverns, I was hoping I wouldn't see a dragon, as when they wake up from their slumber, dragons' main meal is wyverns. Their mouth is usually large enough where they can actually crunch down and just the wings and the head are sticking out. After they're done feasting on wyverns, if that's not enough to fill their belly, then dragons look for other sources of food, and I do not want to be on the menu. We kept trying to hide, but as we got close, no matter how much I wanted to avoid the wyverns, Meth himself took it as a personal challenge to his demon pride. The impulsive asshole took off into the sky and tried to take one down by himself. To his credit, demons like us are powerful and can take a wyvern on one in a fight, which he did. He was able to actually maneuver around and use his demon strength as well as his own resonance power to break a wing of the wyvern and send it down towards the ground, the young wyvern landing with a very large thump. From there, Scarlet, Shireel, Brock, Ichabod, Baron, Lash, and anyone else strong enough charged this thing that crashed nearby, and before this wyvern could actually recover from the impact of the ground, it was actually torn apart, taken out in a matter of moments. Of course, that happens when a minotaur shoves its horn directly into the wyvern's brain stem. That's enough to end it in just a few moments. As this happened, the rest of us rushed the children into a nearby cave we saw, and inside, children stayed as several of us rushed out to grab the supplies. The cave itself was quite large, But using a cave means that it's very defensible. One way in, which means we can point everything to include pulse weapons that we have, which we worry about using. We could just make sure that everyone's funneled. As we started a fire to bring some sort of comfort to the young, saying that this would keep all the wyverns away, which I knew was a line of bullshit, but I kept doing it. Scarlet and the others actually surprised us. They showed up with large, very large pieces of meat that they had just taken from the wyvern they took out. And as it turns out, with their powers combined, they had taken down 3 more. Meth came in looking like absolute roadkill as he got the crap kicked out of him. It looked like he got knocked into the trees, then came back for more, then got knocked into a rock and came back for more. I could see scratch marks, thankfully no bite marks, but still. He sat down, clutching his bleeding arm, and he yelled at me to come and repair him. I walked over to him, but I paused and began mending others on my way, including Scarlet, that had gotten injured in the melee. This pissed me off. Jezebel was helping too, as Meth reached out and grabbed her very violently and demanded that she repair him. My body moved on absolute instinct when I saw the fear and pure, primal fear in her eyes as another male had just grabbed her. I charged in, and I collided with Meth, fist first, into his already injured torso. As he crumpled on the ground, I got over to him and picked him up by the head and neck, staring him right in the eyes as my claws began to dig slightly into his skin, my rage taking over to the point that the entire cave could feel it. I was ready to rip his head clean off. I reached up and grabbed him by his horns, a complete disrespect as far as us demons go. Pulled him close, right up to his eyes, and I said, "Listen, and listen well, you pathetic little prick. You just put the safety of everyone here at risk, my mother and yours included. If you ever even think about doing something that stupid ever again, I can assure you that your body will never, ever be healed again. Not only that, I will take special interest in making sure you suffer. Consider this your only warning. Whatever wild hair you had up your ass has officially been plucked." I dropped his head, pushing a little bit back towards a rock where he bumped it just a little bit. I had actually healed him while I yelled, but he was actually just scared out of his mind because I was about to completely lose it. I realized at a moment that I actually had flames coming out of my mouth, the dragon part of me taking over. He realized he had been healed, but I did not heal him out of pity, but gratitude for the meal that he had brought in. Then I felt something pushing my tail as I stood there. My tail had actually been pushing down on his torso, making sure that he couldn't stand up. And when I turned and looked, I jumped away, screaming, "What the hell? This freak's got an erection!" Meth looked down and was so embarrassed that somebody standing over him yelling had caused such a reaction that he immediately jumped up and ran out of the cave. Some of the adults laughed. Some of the adults were like, what? And of course, the kids didn't quite understand. In the midst of all this, I went over to Jezebel, who was being comforted by Vex the Dryad. Veer the Halfling was also there. I put my hand on her shoulder softly, very softly, and asked if she was all right. To my shock, she reached out, jumped up, and hugged me, pushing me so hard that I actually had to use my tail to force myself to not fall backwards on the ground. She held me extremely tight for a while, and after she let me go, we all sat down for our meal. Though this meal could use some salt and pepper, the beef-flavored chicken that we were eating from these wyverns was actually quite tasty and filling. We remained in the cave overnight. Broche was on fire watch with me that night, and he commended me for my actions and actually said that if he had got to meth first, he might not have been able to handle it so well, as he wouldn't be able to hold back. He already had lost a child of his own, so he might have overdone it. Throughout the night, we kept hearing something near the front of the cave, but we couldn't quite see. It was a bit difficult to see because my night vision kept getting messed up. Every time I went past the firelight, it would take a few seconds before my night vision would actually come back. Because of that, every time I went to the front of the cave, I couldn't really see much. I could see okay. I could see large movements, which there were none, but there was nothing. Yet in the morning, we did find out what it was. There was a pile of freshly picked fruits and berries from the surrounding areas all around. Only one of our number had actually stayed outside that night, and there's no hiding the intention. The fresh fruits and berries were actually an apology. An elf like Jezebel consumes mainly such things, where meth is almost strictly carnivorous. Later that morning, he actually came back with his wings tucked and hanging very low. He walked over to Jezebel and began to apologize as best he could. He really didn't know how, but he tried. Then he did the apology to everyone in the group, and especially to his mother. I appreciated all the things that he had done, that he had finally realized how bad he had gotten, but the thought of his boner against my tail still made me cringe. Ugh. It was decided by the group to stay a few days and rest, recuperate, resupply for sure before heading out. The mountain water seeps gave us fresh water, which meant that nobody had to use their resonance to make sure we got fresh and clean water. Checking out the area, we also found a mountain stream that was actually fairly large, with a waterfall that was about 12 to 14 feet tall, which meant that we could actually have a shower. And the pool underneath the waterfall not only had fish in it, but was also nice and clean, which allowed us to finally bathe, clean ourselves off, because hygiene is still important. However, most of the ladies just wanted a bath. With meat and vegetables plentiful in the area, this was the best time to stock up, and as we did, the dwarves Beatrice and Henry, as well as the halflings Kelly and Vera, explored the cave. Mainly, they were looking for one particular item: mushrooms. Mushrooms that can be used to season our food. Certain mushrooms can actually carry a lot of sodium. Others taste like saffron or pepper or Tabasco even. They were so happy when they started to find these, because that meant that the cave was completely clear of slimes, which meant there was also a plethora of mushrooms. Each time they went harvesting, they came back strictly jubilant of all their satchels just being full of different types of mushrooms. So happy to explain what each one does, they began actually teaching everyone which ones were safe, which ones need to be cooked, which ones could be eaten raw, which ones tasted a certain way, which ones, unless you wanted your ass to feel like a friggin' fiery water cannon, you definitely didn't eat. I paid special attention, as knowing your mushrooms is vitally important in any survival situation. That night, the dwarves and elves worked together to make the best stew we had had. We were able to actually bring a strange pot, which was difficult and heavy to carry, but was definitely worth it. And even as young as she was, Vex used her dryad resonance to bring some more vegetables to ripeness. And we were just feasting and just enjoying the meal very, very much. So much so that I had to retreat to the back of the cave. The reason being is I ate so well, so many calories, the food coma was coming. And I didn't want to ruin anyone's nights or mornings with embarrassment. Scarlet brought me a fur to sleep on, and she sprawled out onto it. I swear, in a few years, that sight of her doing that will test all my resolve. I swear. As we sleep, I feel something. My mind seems to reach out. Reach out to one that is also asleep. No, just not one. I see something. It's though part of me is traveling through the ethereal vines, and there it is. A man and woman, sort of. Like me, they have wings, a tail, horns, but unlike me, they have scales, and their claws are definitely different. They welcome me and Scarlet into their realm. I was surprised to see Scarlet there too as I turned, and I realized it's a dreamscape where we can actually speak to them. I immediately ask if they're demons. They look at each other and begin to laugh. After that, they come to themselves and they say what they actually are: humanoid representations of dragons. They call this mountain range home, actually. I then ask if they had names, where they laughed again. And then eventually the male turns and says, "Only humans give names." I didn't push the subject, as different cultures are just that, different. I asked if they mind if I pose a lot of questions because this is the first time I've ever seen a dragon, ever talked to one. I would like to know everything. They, of course, didn't mind, as they do not get to converse with many in the dreamscape. You have to be within a certain range and have a certain resonance to do so. When they awaken, everyone is actually too frightened as well to talk. Instead, everyone and everything sees them and simply runs away. Rightfully so, as the hunger after a long sleep is quite intense, they say. If, which is a major, major if they're able to satiate their hunger after they wake up, they look to secure their territory, simply usually flying around. They don't attack anybody as they're not hungry. They don't need to strip the entire area. They simply travel around, make sure that their borders are secure, that no others are trying to take it. If they can do so before they sleep creeps in again, then they can do something more pleasurable, which they don't get a chance to do with every single time they wake. When I start laughing, they are confused. Once I catch my breath, I say, "I guess that's a standard for all upon waking from hibernation. All you want is food, a fight, or a fuck, right?" This got them all to chuckle and start busting out laughing as well. It was then Scarlet actually joined in the conversation. She jumped in because she was a bit confused. She was confused and asked them if there are two, there should be more. Are there any more of you? From laughter, the two dragons suddenly got very quiet. I wondered if we had pissed them off. The female then reached out towards the males and just held him, even wrapping her tail around his torso and squeezing him so tight I could visibly see some of his scales begin to buckle. Her wide tail squeezed her so tight as the male spoke. "We have not seen our son in many centuries. He left as he reached maturity to make his own territory. Our daughter, she was far too young. Yet we awoke to find her gone. She wanted to sleep in her own cave. She claimed she was too old to sleep in the same cave as us, her parents. When we were feeding, we should have seen her around, also getting something to eat, but there was nothing." The female dragon at this point was crying, and Scarlet walked over and put her hand on the dragoness's shoulder, eventually wrapping herself around the female dragon. I walked up to them and mentioned how I understand their pain. The male almost sneered at the idea. He looked a bit angry as he said, "How could one so young even think about empathizing, but let alone understand our loss?" I looked at Scarlet for a moment before turning to him again. "I have something to tell you, something that will be difficult to believe at first." I then started to tell him what I was and much of what I went through. I didn't tell him everything, of course. I did tell him that this old soul remembers. I remember days, weeks, years of toil just to survive. I remember losing brothers, sisters, kin, not just losing them, and losing them in some of the most abhorrent fashions possible. Even mentioning how on occasion I would hold some of them as their soul could no longer hold on to the body. Other times, collecting what was left, that is, if there was anything to collect. Still having to drive on forward with life, being the stone in the raging river as everything was falling apart, being someone everybody could rely on. Lifetimes of pain and loss that, thanks to being on the type of astral plane, they believed me as they could see the memories as though they were being projected behind me or above my head. They were all in shock as I got to the point of handing over my dragon son, Rakshan, something that still pulls the tears close to the surface. The memory of my body failing as Scarlet was being taken as she screamed out for me. The loss of Blaze. By the time I finished, the male was humbled. The female and Scarlet were both hugging me, one on each side. I looked the man in the eye and told them, if we see your son or daughter in our travels, I can assure you we will do what we can to get them back to see you. My sincerity made the male gain the resolve back into his eyes, standing up a little taller, but also tear up just a little bit, knowing that I'm not lying to him. As we felt ourselves being pulled out of the dreamscape, we realized that morning must be here. I asked them if we may visit them while they sleep, saying it would be the greatest honor to us, as well as an experience the children will never, ever forget. They agreed without hesitation, which actually surprised me. We were about to leave as I yelled, "We shall leave you a gift as well." Within a moment later, we were waking up. Over a meal, we told the others what happened, who, they, of course, didn't believe us. But they did follow us deep into the cave, deeper than the others had gone. It takes a little over an hour to traverse the entire cave, but as we were getting closer to our destination, we could feel the wind, the warm wind from a dragon's breath. Normally, it would be frighteningly cold wind inside a cave, but not here. The dragons kept things quite comfortable, actually. As we entered the large dugout area where the dragons sleep, many were frightened at what they saw, yet most of the children let curiosity take over and walked right up to the sleeping dragons. It was fairly clear which was male and which was female, which surprised me, as I would never have guessed that a female dragon would actually have mammaries. Then again, thinking about their human forms and how robust her testicles are, I really shouldn't have been surprised. The male was larger than she was, for sure, with a lot more muscles that could be easily seen. We examined them for a long time. The dwarves and halflings actually went nuts over the shedded dragon scales that were just everywhere, all over the ground. I stepped on them thinking they would crunch or something, but no, they were solid. The halflings and dwarves and everyone else who realized the importance began to fill their pouches, their bags, their pockets, everything they could, even handfuls they were ready to rock out with. They told everyone that this was the material of the pulse pistols that they were actually made out of. Standard metals couldn't handle the pressure from the pistols themselves, or they'd heat up so much that they would burn your hand almost off, which is one of the reasons why pulse pistols were so rare. I swear I also saw money signs in their eyes, as they mentioned how just a few ingots of scales, once processed of course, could bring enough money to live like a king for about a decade. Given their size, the scales were surprisingly light. And I hoped we weren't making a mistake by taking some of them. Then again, the ground is just covered with the dang things. They're just everywhere. Before leaving, Scarlett and I had to leave our gift. We had to find a place where we could both touch the dragons, each dragon at the same time. Unfortunately, because they were not actually curled up next to each other, the closest we could get was near the base of their tails, and that was the best we could do given my limited reach. I had to reach out not only with my legs, but also with my arms. If my tail was a little longer, that would help too, but nope. We both focused our demon energy at that point. Our gift was the implementation of erotics into the dreamscape. From that point on, as they sleep, they'd be able to mate as many times as they choose with all the sensations. Upon waking up, and we figured that would be about a decade before that happens, they will be mating with so much passion and frequency with each other that, well, the female is pretty much assured to be pregnant. When asked about what we did, Scarlett simply answered the others, "We just gave them a little gift." Before leaving a few days later, Scarlett and I ended up in the dreamscape whenever we slept actually close enough to the dragons. We didn't realize that right on the edge of the cave you had maybe 100 feet, and then there was just this one line. As soon as you crossed it and fell asleep, you're pulled into the dreamscape whether you want to or not. When we did, it seems as though the two dragons just couldn't get enough of each other. When Scarlett asked if they liked the gift, the female answered, unquestionably enjoying it multiple times. Never thought I would see a dragon orgasm, and, well, I can just say they get violent. Scarlett and I, of course, wanted to leave, but we couldn't until we woke up, and that left to a very strange 7 to 8 hours. We just kind of stood there. A few days later, we were set to leave again. We said goodbye to the dragons in the dreamscape, but they gave an interesting fare thee well. As the female was holding her mate down, looking up at us, long enough to talk, just barely, she said goodbye. He turned to us, but he had to actually maneuver his head sideways and then twist up so he could actually see us. Then he thanked us for the little gift. We left wondering what type of monsters we might have created. Walking out of the cave with a full load of food and a makeshift bag and my bandolier, we continued walking, dodging the flocks of wyverns. However, we did have one bonus while walking, as we could leave that heavy pot behind. The dwarves had been able to actually manufacturing a new bowl using the dragon scales. Not only was it even harder, we checked, but it didn't even weigh a tenth of what the metal one did. It was slow going regardless, as we have to make sure we're not ambushed from above by these wyverns. Our flyers the entire time are pissed, as they need to walk. They don't have a choice. But it's better than becoming wyverns' afternoon lunch. They still could fly, but only at night once the wyverns went to sleep. We began to head downhill more and more and more as we went, which was helpful, but our bags kept getting lighter and lighter as we go, making me a bit nervous about our food supply. We would actually need to stop soon for a resupply, but we had to get away from wyvern territory as quickly as possible. Eventually, we did get away, and we got to an area I knew would work great for us. There was a bunch of rolling hills in between the mountains, large open areas with valleys. It looked just like a survival show I remember back in the day, and there are streams with small lakes covering the valleys in all directions. It was clear why there wasn't any type of trees there. I told everybody that this was going to be a very good place to stop and resupply, and they looked at me once again like I was nuts, but I had not led them astray yet. We were going to hold there a while, and I took a group to the nearest pond. As we approached, I saw something swimming. Something familiar. something that slapped the surface of the water as it dove down underneath, and I smiled at what I saw. A few got nervous at my grin of joy seeing my fangs just sitting there, and I inadvertently began to drool. As the camp is being set up, wood collected, greens, fruits, nuts, and all that gathered, we went hunting. Due to the wet ground around the ponds, our larger personnel weren't going to be helping no matter what. They'd end up sinking and it would take us hours to pull them out. Plus, we needed claws. When I said that, a little feline girl named Deanie followed us, but I wasn't sure she would have the ability to help. She is very young and very petite. I asked her to wait on the side while we actually did the hunting. She could watch or do whatever she wanted, just please don't get in the way. We don't want her to get hurt. As the others in the group sat on the edge of this den made of wood, it was near the center of the pond, but close enough to the edge where something could run out and try to make a bolt for it. As they sat, claws ready, I began to rip the top of the den open. As I did, the prey inside, just as I broke into the center section, they ran out and made a break for it. As they did, claws swiped into the water and into the necks of the animals, pulling them right out of the water. In a fury of claws and fangs, we got 3 very large animals. We then went to another den and did the same. Once we got them on shore, I began to process them out, and as I did, I remembered there are certain glands of these creatures, certain glands that are pretty much oil and could be used to soften the straps that were digging into our heavy lifters, and that's the main thing they complain about. Just as I was about to toss the guts back into the water, guts I didn't have time to clean so we could eat, we heard a splash, a strange splash. It was light, but it was there. As I turned to look over, a small fish came flying through the air. Standing up, we could see Deanie Girl looking at the water and then slapping, and when she did, she pulled a fish clean out of the pond with her retractable claws. This added to our bounty for sure. I knew I wouldn't eat her catch for sure, as fish is a preferred meat to many of the others. After I was done, we made sure Deanie was finished, and then I showed her how to process her fish. And then we all set up to carry our meal up to the camp. Deanie was all smiles with those fish on a stick. She couldn't wait to simply show them off, and now she also had fish to eat, something that she absolutely loved. And as she ran up, she was action-packed with energy as the rest of us simply walked into camp. She couldn't help but show off her catch to the others, and I'm glad she did. We had to remind her to cook the fish first before she stuck her fangs into it, as just in case. And as we finally got into the center of the camp, we brought over the big catch to the fire. We put them down, and Lash stood there, looks and asks, "You can eat that? They look like giant rats with a wide tail." Turning to her, I asked, "What's wrong? Have you never eaten beaver before?" Then I realized her chest still hurt from those straps, and I said, "You know what? You wouldn't have? Never mind." Then I walked over, gave her a quick heel, and then I pulled those greasy glands out of a pouch, and I went over to her own satchel and also where the harness was, and I began smearing all this goop all over it. Hopefully this would soften it up more just a bit, make it just a little bit more comfortable. That night, we all ate very, very well. With the fruit close enough to season that Vex and the others needed minimal residence to ripen them, grass was soft and plentiful. Not only soft to sleep on, but there were plenty of grass heads that we could make into quick cakes. The other plants were so robust, it was almost silly. You didn't even have to look. You just reached over and grabbed some of it. It's right there. This bounty even included a mass of mountain vegetables, some of which I didn't even know what they were. Thankfully, others did. There were plenty of tubers to be harvested as well, and the meat was stripped off the bone as all of us just grabbed a hold of it and pulled it clean off. A fresh kill, something cooked about medium rare, and it was just delicious. There was nothing left at the end, nothing left that broken bones that were cracked so that several others could get the marrow out. In particular, Lash, being an orc herself, she loves marrow. Once everybody was done, and just as everybody was starting to get ready to go to sleep, I made an announcement. I congratulated everybody for making it so far. We had actually crossed the mountains. We were now more towards the foothills than anything else. We had actually passed the wyvern flocks, and we're all still here. And since this is the foothills, we're almost done. Soon we will reach the narrow sea, and we'll meet up with Lestina and Yalan and the other aquatics. So eat well, sleep well, and take comfort in your knowledge that they tried to break us, and they have failed. We are now stronger than they could ever possibly imagine. Even the youngest here are stronger than they could possibly imagine. I looked at them, and all the young actually had these big shit-eating grin on their faces. I turned back towards the center and continued by saying, I am grateful to call y'all family. Because as we know, not all family is blood. There are some cheers as I finish up, and a lot of hugs with each other, especially those that are related by summons or by blood. When I sat back down, Scarlet gave me a really big hug, which, seriously, Scarlet, watch where you're putting those things, okay? Sometimes it's hard to breathe. I didn't tell her this, but that's all I was saying. Although I didn't have to say that from the double hug from Lash and Vex, especially since Lash was behind me. The fairies came next, as though I could have gone without the pixies giving me a hug by straddling my damn face. I had to hold my breath until she let go, and I'll admit, it was getting difficult to hold my breath. That night, as Scarlet and I moved away from the group because both of us were going to fall asleep, I noticed movement. I asked Deanie Girl if she was actually going to be following us, and she said she wanted to stay next to us that night. I laughed and agreed, even though I knew she wanted to be there mainly because she wanted to see if I was going to start another fire with a flaming booger like I had before. I stayed awake as the two drifted off. I covered them both up with a fur as I watched Scarlet just wrap her arms and her wings around the little cat girl. The large meal had me actually buzzing a little too much with energy, so I wasn't going to sleep, not for a few hours. I thought about our next move. We should be able to reach the river soon, and in a day or two, with luck, Yolan and the others will actually be waiting on the river, and we can just continue to huck fin our way right to the ocean. I looked over to the other camp, and I could see Shireel there tending the fire, her demoness form shimmering in the light. It fills me with joy and hope. Hope that very soon we will see our friends again. Joy that we will finally get off this fucking mountain. Though it makes me think as well, once we're done with the mountain, what other dangers, what other challenges are we going to face when we get there? Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 11 of this ongoing series. Now before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Douglas Scarborough, and I also need to send out some great big thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are SS Demon, Brian Kemp, Erica Gem, MTF Guard, Prozac and Pancakes, Guardian Stage, and Steve Ewing. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting!